Robert Johnson is best known as the man who sold his soul to the devil at a crossroads for fame. But was it really the devil who was responsible for his extraordinary talents, or was it self-determination? Now, Robert Johnson's life was marked with tragedy that began even before he was born. But in order to capture his entire story, I'm going to start in the middle, at the point that we all know best, the part in which he sells his soul to the devil. Then I'll work backward. And of course, if you guys want to watch the documentary that I watched to inform this video, please check out the Netflix special, Remastered Devil at the Crossroads. It's 48 minutes long. You can play it in the background. It's a really good documentary. The part of Robert's story that amasses the most superstition is the point in time in which he goes missing for a year. And when he arrives back to the Mississippi Delta after that year is over, he has a set of guitar skills that can only be described as supernatural. This is a far cry from where he started, which was as a mediocre, subpar guitar player. As a result, this catches the attention of the ultra-conservative African-American community that he's residing in. And obviously, with the blues being considered devil's music, this did not help quell any rumors that Robert Johnson not only went and sold his soul to the devil, but he's playing in his honor by playing this blues music. Now, allegedly, when Johnson met the devil at the crossroads that night, he kneeled down, handed him his guitar, and the devil took it and told Johnson that they had a deal. He would make him the greatest guitar player there ever was. But this is really far from the truth. The reality is, Johnson likely just practiced. Because despite the sensationalism of selling your soul to the devil, the reality is, Johnson had just gone home. He went home to Hazelhurst to find his father, and along the way he saw his mentor. His mentor agreed to teach him how to play the guitar because the mentor was also extremely gifted. He would sit in the cemetery at night, and they would practice till the morning, and thus Johnson learned to play the guitar. And if anything, Johnson practiced hoodoo, which was common in the Delta at that time. Eating at a crossroad, some of the lyrics in his songs, they all point to that. And now I'm going to move to the beginning of Robert's story, which, like I mentioned, was marked with tragedy that began even before he was born. And this is because, you see, Robert's mother was married to a once wealthy farmer and carpenter. Sadly, this farmer-carpenter's success resulted in the attention of the white people in the area of Mississippi that they were residing in. And as a result, they ran him out of town, forcing the two to separate. As a result, his mother did eventually find a new lover in the form of a lumberman. They had a child, which would become Robert Johnson, and that relationship did not work out. So by the age of roughly 25, she had already gone through 2 marriages and a divorce and had a baby. She moves on to another city, meets a sharecropper, and there they would stay for at least a little while. But Robert never got along with his sharecropping stepfather because he thought Robert was soft because he didn't want to go sharecrop in the fields and help the family make money. Robert, as a kid, was only really concerned about one thing, though, and that was playing the guitar and making a nickel here or there, and he was content to do that. Now, obviously, he did have some elevated dreams for himself, but they often butted heads with his father's expectations. And as a result, one day Robert decided to leave the farm and head out on his own, moving from town to town, city to city, playing corner to corner, and occasionally the juke joints when he could get a bid in. But he wasn't the most successful at that time, and like I mentioned, at best, he was a subpar guitar player. He wasn't really making any money. He came back to the South, and he met a girl named Virginia. The two would fall in love, but sadly, neither was old enough to get married, but this didn't stop them. The two of them would proceed to the local courthouse where they would go ahead and get married anyways. And at one point during his marriage, Robert found out that his wife was pregnant. Not wanting to be alone in the 8th month of her pregnancy, she decided to go move in with her grandmother, and Robert took this time to go and dabble in his guitar, which, by the way, was still recognized as a devil's tool in an ultra-conservative Southern community. But this didn't stop him from playing, and so he would go from town to town, dabbling in his instrument. Sadly, this would make him late for the birth of his child, and this was even more painful because he would later learn that both mother and baby died during childbirth. And of course, her family blamed him for not being there on his music. Sadly, this is something that Johnson would come to regret for the rest of his life, and it may have also been the start of a moderate drinking problem for Robert. But he would use this time after the death of his wife and child to begin playing his guitar again and trying to seek out places to play. Eventually, he did identify some mentors. They weren't too keen on him, but they did let him hang out and come around them. But there was one fateful night in particular that would change Robert's life forever. And this particular night involved him playing his guitar on stage, a rinky-dink guitar that started to irritate the patrons. And there were two women sitting in the front row who finally had had enough, and they asked his mentors to get Robert off of the stage. This clicked something in Robert, and he decided to leave the venue, and this is where he would go into his year-long hiatus, where nobody would see or hear from him until his return approximately 1 year later. So before I get into the part of Robert's story detailing his return and his hiatus, I thought it important to cover why blues music was considered the devil's music. And this is because, much like today, people like to go out on Friday and Saturday nights. But they would get drunk, spend up all their money, possibly get injured, and for whatever reason, not make it to church on Sunday. As a result, the reverends or the pastors were noticing that they weren't getting paid as much as they would have been otherwise, and so they started telling their existing members of the congregation why going to the juke joints and listening to blues music was bad and like the devil. And this obviously spread to the households and around the towns. This is how blues music got the moniker the devil's music. So back to the story. After Robert returned from his 1 year hiatus, he was described as appearing at a juke joint with an air of supernatural confidence. He took his guitar, he approached the stage, and he saw his two mentors there, and he wanted to play. They told him to get out of here, and he was just like, hey, give me a chance. Let's see what I can do. They said, okay, Robert. He got on stage, and he was doing things nobody in the Delta had seen before. It was almost as if two people were playing the guitar with him, and that was unheard of. Because remember, Robert Johnson went from being somebody who could barely pluck a string to playing concert-level performances. It was unheard of, uncanny, unreal almost. In fact, his whole aura had changed. He had a mastery of the guitar that surpassed that of even his mentors. So obviously, this got the rumor mill swirling. And with his newfound talent and confidence came notoriety. Robert would go from town to town, wooing women, awing audiences, and playing this guitar with a skill level that was unseen anywhere throughout the Delta. But sadly, he lived a hard and fast life, and eventually his ways would catch up with him. Because unfortunately for Johnson, he was messing with a woman whose husband didn't appreciate their affair. And one day while he was at a bar, he ordered a drink and one was sent over. However, this bottle that he had ordered was partially opened, and there was a patron sitting next to him who slapped it out of his hand. This irritated Johnson because at the time, a $7 bottle of alcohol was a lot of money. And so the gentleman apologized, picked up his bottle, Robert drank it, and proceeded to die. The bottle was poisoned. And of course, even though the man was found, nobody did anything about it. The police didn't care to do much, and the people in the town didn't care to do much either, because as far as they were concerned, Johnson was practicing the devil's music. He lived a hard and fast life, and that's what you get when you do it. Robert's death would also make him a member of the infamous 27 Club, which are those celebrities that died at the age of 27. And to close out the video, if you are one of the ones who believe that Robert did sell his soul, withstand that the devil appeared to keep his end of the bargain. Robert is now more famous in death than he ever was in life. His music would go on to influence bands like the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, and artists like Bonnie Raitt and Eric Clapton.